They said the royal princess was dead, burned in the flames of betrayal. But Blake, the feared Alpha King, didn't believe in ghosts. And Isabella, she was no ghost. She was hiding in plain sight, her voice locked away by choice, her secret deadlier than her silence. The night the kingdom turned to ash, Isabella ran. The sky itself had split open with fire, the palace walls collapsing around her like the closing jaws of a beast. Screams had filled the air, her father's soldiers, her mother's maids, her own kin, all scattered, betrayed by those sworn to protect them. The memory clung to her skin like smoke. Her crown had been snatched, her name declared cursed, her bloodline rejected. They called her unfit. They called her weak. And so they tried to burn her from history. But Isabella lived. And living meant hiding. For months, she drifted through forests and across rivers, the weight of exile pressing on her chest like a second heartbeat. She could never stay in one place too long. Her face, though pale and worn, still bore the sharp grace of royalty. Her voice, delicate and commanding, was too dangerous. Someone would recognize it. So she smothered it. She forced silence on herself, swallowing every word until her throat ached with restraint. In silence she could become no one. In silence she could survive. That silence carried her across borders, deep into the lands ruled by the Alpha King. A territory whispered about in the markets of rogues and drifters. Savage, merciless, unforgiving. But it was also safe in its own way. No one dared trespass here without consequence. Isabella crossed the threshold and entered Blake's domain, a girl cloaked in rags, a shadow of the princess she had been. The first night she arrived, she was taken by guards, questioned, shoved, threatened. She did not answer. They prodded her, cursed at her, demanded her name. She only bowed her head and played her part. A mute girl. Harmless. Forgettable. The guards, irritated but dismissive, tossed her into the kitchens of the grand stone fortress that overlooked Blake's lands. It was there Isabella began her second life. Not as a princess, not as a runaway, but as a silent servant lost among dozens of others. But she had not escaped notice. Blake had seen her. The Alpha King was not a man easily fooled. His presence was like thunder bottled into flesh. His height towering, his shoulders broad. His eyes dark as a storm brewing on the horizon. His aura rolled across rooms before he ever stepped inside, bending wolves to their knees with nothing more than a glance. Blake noticed everything. And what he noticed most of all was silence. The first time his gaze found her, Isabella nearly broke. She had been carrying a tray through the hall, her steps quick but careful, her chin lowered. Yet something in the air shifted, a ripple of tension that raised gooseflesh across her skin. She looked up and there he was, the Alpha King himself, walking the marble corridor, his cloak trailing like shadows behind him. His eyes caught hers. The weight of that stare pinned her in place, freezing the breath in her lungs. Wolves bowed as he passed, warriors saluted, servants trembled. But Blake's eyes lingered only on her. One heartbeat. Then his gaze flicked away, as though dismissing her, yet she could feel the mark of it burning against her skin long after he was gone. From that moment on, Isabella lived on the edge of a blade. She learned quickly that Blake crossed her path often, perhaps too often for coincidence. In the mess hall when she poured ale. In the courtyard sweeping stone steps. In the kitchens, scrubbing pots as soldiers delivered their reports. Each time his eyes would find her. And each time she pretended not to notice. She never spoke. She never met his gaze for long. She never allowed the mask to slip. Blake was hunting something in her. One evening, as the fortress drowned in shadows and torchlight, Isabella was summoned unexpectedly. "Girl," a guard barked, shoving her forward. "The Alpha wants eyes on you." Her heart thundered. The Alpha. Blake. Couldn't be. She was nothing. She was no one. But the guards didn't care about her trembling. They dragged her down corridors, their boots echoing against stone, until the massive doors of the throne room groaned open. And there he was. The Alpha King sat upon the throne, carved from black stone and silver. He leaned back, one elbow propped, his hand pressed against his chin in thought. Shadows clung to him, as though even the fire dared not burn too close. When the guards forced her forward, his eyes lifted. Those eyes, dark, calculating, piercing. She wanted to run. She wanted to vanish. But her knees locked, her hands trembling against her sides. "She doesn't speak," one of the guards explained with a scoff. "A mute stray. Picked her up weeks ago in the markets. Works hard though. Doesn't cause trouble." Blake's eyes narrowed. Mute. The word dripped from his tongue, heavy with suspicion. The room was silent. The torches cracked, the air heavy with the weight of his presence. Isabella kept her head bowed, every muscle screaming to flee. Blake rose from the throne. The sound of his boots against the floor was slow, deliberate, each step pulling the air tighter in her chest. He circled her once, a predator measuring prey, his aura brushing against her like the edge of a blade. Finally he stopped in front of her. "Mute, are you?" His voice was low, dangerous. "Or hiding something you fear I'll hear?" Her lips pressed together, her jaw locked. Blake's hand rose, slow but unrelenting, until his fingers caught her chin. He tilted her face up, forcing her eyes to his. And the world fell away. It was as if he could see through her silence, past the rags, past the dirt, straight into the secret she buried beneath her ribs. The rejected princess. The girl who was supposed to be dead. His eyes narrowed further, studying her, testing her. His grip on her chin was not cruel, but it was unyielding, commanding. "Who are you really, girl?" They said silence was safety. But silence, Isabella was learning, was also a prison. Days bled into nights inside the Alpha King's fortress. The castle was alive with movement, guards clattering in armor, servants rushing with trays of food, the sharp bark of orders echoing across stone halls. Isabella moved among them like a ghost. Her steps were soft, her head lowered, her lips sealed. And yet, ghosts were meant to go unnoticed. She did not. Blake had seen her. He had chosen to see her. From that night in the throne room, Isabella knew she was caught in the Alpha King's net. He did not expose her, not yet. Instead he watched. He waited. He tested. Each morning she scrubbed the grand hall floors, her hands raw from lie, and each morning, his boots passed by her shoulder. Too close. Too deliberate. Each evening she carried jugs of wine into the dining chambers, and though warriors feasted loudly, laughing and spilling ale, Blake's gaze always flicked to her. A weight she felt burn into her spine even when she did not dare look up. Why? She was nothing. A servant. Stray. A mute girl who should have blended into the stone. But Blake was a predator. Predators never ignored the one creature that didn't act like the rest. One night, as the servants gathered to eat the scraps left from the warrior's table, Isabella slipped onto a wooden bench. She kept her eyes down, fingers folding into her lap. Around her chatter rose, maids whispering, young stable boys joking, older women muttering about aching backs. But soon the whispers turned sharp. "She thinks she's special, doesn't she?" One maid hissed, her voice dipped in venom. "Doesn't speak, doesn't smile. Just walks around as though she's above the rest of us." Another snickered. "And the way the Alpha looks at her. I've served here 3 years and never once got a glance. But the mute. Oh, she gets his attention." Jealousy, raw and bitter, poisoned their voices. Isabella stiffened but did not look up. A hand suddenly shoved her shoulder. Hard. Her bowl toppled, bread scattering to the floor. "You think you're better than us, don't you?" the first maid snarled. "Answer me." "Oh, that's right. You can't." Laughter rippled around the bench. Isabella kept her eyes on the dirt. Her chest burned, humiliation clawing at her throat. But she said nothing. What she didn't see, what none of them saw, was Blake standing in the archway, half hidden in shadows. He had been watching. Again. The great Alpha King, who had slain enemies with his bare hands, stood silently as the servants mocked her. His jaw clenched. His wolf snarled beneath his skin, restless. But Blake did not step forward. Not yet. He wanted to see. To watch how the girl who claimed muteness would react. Would she break? Would she fight? Would she reveal herself? But Isabella only bent, gathering the bread silently from the floor, brushing dust from the crumbs. Her face was calm, but her fingers trembled as she set the food back in the bowl. She did not lift her eyes. She did not defend herself. She swallowed her pain with silence. Blake's eyes narrowed. The days that followed only deepened his suspicion. He began to test her, subtle at first. He would order a servant to speak, to sing, to answer simple questions, then suddenly command Isabella to do the same. His tone was casual, his gaze sharp. "Girl," he said one morning, his voice echoing across the dining chamber, "pour me wine. And while you do, tell me your name." Isabella froze, the jug trembling in her grip. The other servants looked up, curious, some smirking. Her lips parted, then closed. She lowered her head, setting the jug carefully on the table. Blake leaned back in his chair, watching her with wolfish patience. "Nothing." His tone was deceptively mild. Not even a sound. She only bowed. His jaw tightened. "Very well." He waved a hand, dismissing her. But his eyes followed her retreating form long after she slipped from the chamber. It became a game of cat and mouse. In the stables, he would approach suddenly, startling her, just to see if instinct forced her to speak. In the courtyard, he would position himself close, whispering sharp commands, testing if fear broke her silence. But Isabella held firm. The weight of her past, the memory of betrayal, the danger of being recognized, all of it welded her lips shut. She could not risk words. Yet in her silence, she betrayed something else. Presence. Even the other servants began to sense it. When Isabella walked into a room, conversations dipped. When she passed through the market square, eyes followed. Her bearing, no matter how much she tried to slouch, to shrink, still carried an elegance. A grace that could not be scrubbed away with dirt or disguised with rags. It was the way she moved, too poised. The way her eyes flicked across rooms, too sharp. The way her silence itself felt like a shield, as though she was not mute, but refusing to speak. And people noticed. People whispered. One evening, as Isabella scrubbed dishes in the kitchen, two maids lingered nearby, their voices low but not low enough. "I swear she carries herself like a lady," one muttered. The other snorted. "A lady? She's a kitchen rat. No, look at her. The way she stands, the way she looks. She doesn't belong here." Their eyes slid to Isabella. She kept her head bent, though her ears burned with every word. "She looks just like..." The first maid's voice dropped further, trembling with unease. "The dead princess." The second maid gasped. "Don't say that. The princess burned. Everyone knows. I'm telling you. The resemblance, it's uncanny. If the alpha ever found out." The words cut off sharply. A presence filled the kitchen doorway. Heavy, dangerous, Blake. The Alpha King stood in the shadows, his expression unreadable, but his eyes burned like embers as they fixed on the whispering maids. They froze, paling, stammering excuses. But Blake barely glanced at them. His gaze was locked on Isabella, who stood rooted to the floor, her hands clutching a dripping rag, her body rigid as stone. The torches flickered. The kitchen fell silent. And then, in a voice like thunder rolling low across the earth, Blake spoke. "Repeat that." Silence had become her shield. But now it was also her noose. From the moment Blake overheard the whisper, "She looks just like the dead princess," the atmosphere around Isabella shifted. The Alpha King had not punished the maids who spoke it. He had not questioned Isabella directly. Instead, he had grown quieter, more deliberate, as though studying her like prey caught in his sights. And Blake was not the kind of predator who rushed the kill. He was the kind who circled slowly, waiting for weakness, setting traps so perfectly the victim wouldn't see them until the jaws snapped shut. The first trap came the very next morning. Isabella had been sweeping the marble corridor outside the council chamber. Her body bent low, her mind carefully blank. Blake emerged from the chamber mid-discussion with his generals. His stride long, his voice commanding. "And if the eastern border is breached, I want blood on the snow before dawn." The generals nodded, muttering obedience, but Blake's eyes cut toward Isabella. She froze, sweeping bristles scraping stone. "Girl!" he barked, and though he didn't raise his voice, it carried like thunder. Her fingers tightened around the broom. She did not look up. Blake stopped before her. "The bucket. Bring it here." She obeyed, lifting the heavy pail of water, carrying it carefully toward him. He reached in, plucked out a rag, and tossed it onto the polished table beside him. His generals exchanged confused glances. "Spill some water," Blake ordered. Her heart hammered. "Spill." On the table carved from blackwood. The one meant only for councils of war. But his eyes were unyielding. Slowly, she tipped the bucket, letting water slosh across the wood. Gasps rippled through the generals. "Now," Blake said smoothly, "wipe it up. And tell me why I asked you to do it." Isabella froze. Her throat locked. The rag dripped in her hand. The men watched, waiting. But she said nothing. Not a word. Only silence. Her hand moved instead, scrubbing the water quickly until the table gleamed once more. She kept her eyes down, her breath tight in her chest. When she finished, Blake leaned close. So close she felt the heat of his presence at her ear. "Strange, isn't it," he murmured, "that you can follow every command, yet never answer a simple question." Her body went rigid. His voice slid through her bones like a blade pressed to skin. Then he straightened, turning sharply on his heel, dismissing her without another word. But the challenge had only begun. The second trap came in the training yard. Blake often walked among his warriors as they sparred, his presence alone enough to sharpen their strikes. Isabella had been sweeping dust near the edge of the yard when his voice rang out. "Ooh, girl, come here." Every eye turned to her. Her pulse spiked as she stepped forward, her broom trembling in her grasp. Blake gestured toward a sparring circle. "Take that blade." Her breath caught. A wooden practice sword lay at her feet. She shook her head faintly, backing a step. His tone cut sharp. It. She bent, picked it up. The weight felt alien in her hand, though once she had trained with steel under the watchful eyes of her father's guards. Memories seared her chest, but she forced her face blank. "Swing," Blake commanded. She hesitated. His warriors smirked, some amused, others curious. "Swing." His voice cracked like a whip. Her arms moved before she could think. The sword cut through the air, steady, precise. Too precise. A hush rippled across the yard. Blake's eyes narrowed. Again. She swung once more, muscles remembering what her mind begged to forget. Blake's lips curled, not in surprise, but in grim satisfaction. When she lowered the sword, trembling, he leaned in. His voice low enough only she could hear. "Servants don't swing like soldiers. Who are you, girl?" But Isabella only dropped the weapon and bowed her head, forcing silence to hold like chains around her tongue. His wolf snarled beneath his skin, but he let her go. For now. Yet not all his traps were cruel. Some were subtle, teasing, almost playful. In the gardens, he caught her alone, her arms full of herbs for the kitchens. "Mute girl," he said, blocking her path. His eyes gleamed in the dappled light, sharp yet curious. "If you cannot speak, then answer me another way." He pointed to the roses. "Red for yes, white for no. Choose." Her breath caught. What was he doing? "Do you understand me?" he asked. She hesitated, then slowly touched a red rose. His lips twitched. "Good. So you can answer." Her chest tightened. Have you been lying about your voice all this time? Her fingers hovered, then brushed a white bloom. His gaze darkened, though his lips curved faintly, amused at her cleverness. Are you hiding something worth killing for? Her hand trembled above the flowers. She forced herself to touch white.
Well,
but her eyes betrayed her. Wide, luminous, flickering with secrets she could not bury. Blake's stare lingered, heat rolling off him in waves. His wolf pressed against his skin, restless, intrigued. This girl was no ordinary servant. She was something rare, something dangerous, and against his will, he wanted her. That want became a war inside him. In the silence of his chambers, he found his thoughts drifting back to her. The way her lashes lowered when he trapped her, the way her silence felt heavy, not empty. Like she carried storms in her chest but refused to let them break. Blake had taken many women to his bed, but none haunted him when they left. This mute servant haunted him without a single touch. It infuriated him, fascinated him, and so he set the cruelest trap yet. The Great Feast. It was a night of blood and revelry, celebrating victory over raiders at the northern border. Warriors filled the hall, their laughter booming, their mugs overflowing with wine. Music clashed with voices, the air thick with roasted meat and the tang of ale. At the head of it all sat Blake, a wolf among men, his crown of obsidian glinting in firelight. Isabella moved silently among the servants, filling goblets, clearing platters. She kept her head down, avoiding his gaze. But she could feel it, the pull of his eyes across the hall, tethering her to him. She tried to escape it, to vanish among the dozens of others. But Blake had chosen tonight. He slammed his mug to the table. The music faltered, chatter dimming. His voice rolled out, deep and commanding. Silence! The hall obeyed instantly. Blake rose, his gaze sweeping the room, before landing squarely on Isabella. You, he said. Her heart stopped. Every head turned. The Alpha King's voice filled the air, slow, deliberate, lethal in its simplicity. Sing for your king. They said silence was a shield. But for Isabella, silence was a prison. And tonight, that prison was beginning to crack. The great hall of the Alpha King's castle glimmered with candlelight, shadows dancing against stone walls carved with the history of his bloodline. The air was alive with voices, nobles whispering, warriors laughing, servants rushing to and fro. And at the center of it all sat Blake, the ruthless Alpha King. His piercing eyes never still, always watching. And tonight, his gaze was fixed on her. Isabella stood among the servants at the edge of the hall, her tray balanced in trembling hands. She had survived 3 weeks within these walls, her disguise intact, her secret buried under her feigned muteness. But Blake was relentless. Every glance from him felt like a challenge. Every silence she kept seemed to sharpen his suspicion. The feast had been meant to honor Blake's victory over a rival Alpha. Wine flowed freely, meat and roasted game filled the tables. Yet despite the revelry, Isabella's skin prickled with unease. She had noticed it earlier, the way Blake's gaze lingered on her longer than on any other servant. And then it came. Sing for your king, Blake had commanded during the feast. The words had frozen the hall. Servants had stopped moving. Nobles leaned forward in curiosity. Isabella's blood turned cold. Now, hours later, the echoes of that command still rattled in her chest. She had managed to evade it then, dropping her tray, bowing low, retreating under the guise of clumsiness. The laughter of courtiers had shielded her escape. But Blake had not laughed. His eyes had burned with certainty. He knew. And tonight he would press harder. The feast ended, but the castle did not sleep. Isabella returned to her duties, scrubbing goblets, fetching water, folding linens. The other maids snickered behind her back, their jealousy growing like weeds. Blake had noticed her silence, and to them, that meant she was favored. Favor bred envy. One maid, Leora, a sharp-tongued girl with ambitions far larger than her station, cornered Isabella in the corridor. Think you're special, don't you? Leora hissed, her eyes glittering in the torchlight. The king looks at you. He notices you. But you're nothing. Just a mute little rat hiding under his table. Isabella said nothing. She couldn't. Words threatened to spill from her lips like fire, but she bit them back, lowering her gaze. Leora's smirk widened. Pathetic. If you had a voice you'd scream. But you don't. Do you? The other maids laughed, their cruel chorus echoing. Isabella's chest tightened. Not with shame but with rage. If only they knew who she truly was. Princess of a fallen throne, survivor of betrayal. If only they knew the blood that sang in her veins. But they could not. She shoved past them, her steps quickening. The urge to speak burned in her throat like wildfire. And then fate delivered the blow. Later that night, as she carried folded linens across the hall, a noblewoman's shrill voice cut through the chamber. Lady Selene, beautiful, venomous, and openly ambitious, stood near Blake's throne, her jeweled gown glimmering. She had long set her eyes on the Alpha King, and any woman who drew even a flicker of his attention became her enemy. Her gaze fell on Isabella. She moves too gracefully for a servant, Selene sneered, her voice loud enough for the entire hall to hear. Her silence is unnatural. Tell me, my king. Have you ever wondered what kind of creature hides behind quiet eyes? The hall stilled. Blake's golden gaze flickered toward Isabella. He did not answer, only studied her, his silence heavier than words. Selene stepped forward, her lips curling. I'll tell you what she is. A witch. A mute witch who's cast a spell over this court. Look at her. She doesn't speak, yet she makes the king notice her. No ordinary girl could manage that. Gasps rippled through the room. Isabella's heart slammed against her ribs. A witch. The word cut through the air like a blade. Before she could retreat, Selene raised her voice further. I say she bewitched us all. And if she's truly innocent, let her speak. Let her prove her tongue is not cursed. The court erupted in murmurs. All eyes turned to Isabella. The moment stretched like a noose around her neck. Her mouth parted, but no sound came. Her silence screamed louder than words ever could. Selene smiled triumphantly. See. She cannot. She is. Enough. Blake's voice thundered through the hall, silencing all. He rose from his throne, every inch the predator king. His presence commanded the air itself to bow. He strode forward until he stood before Isabella, his shadow swallowing her. Selene shrank back, though her eyes burned with fury. Blake's gaze never left Isabella's face. His hand rose not to strike, but to grip her chin, tilting her head upward. His golden eyes bore into hers, searching, demanding. She is no witch, he declared. His voice was sharp, final. And any who accuse her again will answer to me. The hall trembled with the weight of his words. Selene paled, bowing quickly to mask her defeat. But Isabella could not breathe. Relief flooded her, yet so did dread. For Blake's grip was firm, unyielding, and his eyes told her he did not speak out of mercy. He spoke because he knew. Because her silence was his puzzle, and he would not rest until it was solved. At last he released her. His lips brushed her ear as he leaned close. His voice a low growl meant for her alone. You can't hide from me forever. And then he was gone, striding back to his throne as if nothing had happened. But his words chained themselves to her heart. That night, Isabella stumbled back to her small chamber, her body trembling. She shut the door and pressed her back against it, sliding to the floor. The mask she wore every day cracked, her breath breaking into sobs she couldn't release. She had held her silence for weeks, hidden behind it like a shield. But now the cracks spread too wide. Blake's voice haunted her. Selene's accusation lingered like poison. And her heart, oh, her traitorous heart, ached every time his eyes met hers. She crossed to the small bed, her hands shaking. Her reflection stared back at her from the polished silver of a water jug. Not a servant. Not a mute girl. Princess. A flame thought extinguished. Her throat ached. Words pressed against her lips, desperate to be free. And then, for the first time in weeks, she let one slip. A whisper. A single word carried on trembling breath. Blake. Her voice cracked the silence. Fragile. A forbidden melody. And outside her chamber door, the floorboards creaked. Her blood froze. 'Cause Blake was there. He had heard. Silence had been her armor. But when her voice slipped free, it was no longer a shield. It was a blade, and Blake was the one it cut deepest. The moment the whisper left her lips, Isabella knew she had doomed herself. Her small chamber was cloaked in darkness, the faint glow of a single candle flickering on the bedside table. She hadn't meant to speak. Not really. The word had torn itself from her soul, carried on a trembling breath she could no longer hold back. Blake. It was barely sound, barely air, but it was enough. Because the scrape of boots against the stone floor outside her door told her she wasn't alone. Her blood froze. The latch lifted, and the heavy wooden door creaked open. There he was. Blake filled the doorway, his broad shoulders framed by torchlight from the corridor. His golden eyes glowed like fire in the shadows, fixed on her with predatory precision. The air shifted, heavy with a scent of danger, dominance, and something more. Something electric that made Isabella's heart stutter. He stepped inside, shutting the door with a slow, deliberate push. The soft click of the latch sealing her in with him was louder than thunder in her ears. For a heartbeat, neither moved. The silence between them was sharp enough to cut. Then Blake spoke. His voice a low growl that seemed to rattle the very walls. You spoke. The words were not a question. They were a verdict. Isabella's breath hitched, her throat dry. She shook her head quickly, desperate, her hands rising instinctively in protest. Her eyes, wide, pleading, begged him to believe it had been a trick of the wind, a figment of imagination. But Blake was no fool. He moved closer, each step slow, controlled like a wolf circling prey. You think me blind? Deaf? His tone sharpened, cutting into her like steel. I heard you. Your lips moved. A voice came out. Isabella backed away until the back of her knees hit the edge of the bed. She gripped the sheets, her body trembling. She wanted to speak, to deny it, but fear strangled the words before they could form. Her silence only enraged him more. Blake's hand shot out, gripping the wooden post of her bed as he leaned down, his face inches from hers. His eyes blazed with an intensity that stole her breath. Say it again, he demanded. Her lips parted but no sound came. Her pulse thundered in her ears. Say it, he growled, his voice low, dangerous. Let me hear what you hide. His dominance pressed down on her, suffocating. But something else stirred within her chest, something reckless, rebellious. She had hidden her voice for weeks, burying her truth in silence. Yet here he was, tearing down the walls she had built. Her throat burned. The word clawed its way up again, and before she could stop it, her voice slipped free. Please. It was soft, fragile. A whisper carried on trembling lips. But it was a voice. Her voice. Blake froze. For the first time since she had met him, the Alpha King looked shaken. His eyes widened, his breath stilled. The mask of ruthless authority cracked, if only for a heartbeat. Her voice hung in the air between them, delicate yet powerful. It was a sound that didn't belong to a servant. It was refined, melodic, like silk over steel. And Blake knew it. He straightened slowly, his eyes narrowing as though staring at a ghost. His jaw tightened, his fists clenched at his sides. That voice, he said, his tone dangerous in its softness. I know it. Isabella's heart lurched. Well, he couldn't place it. Not yet. Blake's gaze darkened, suspicion sharpening like a blade. He stepped forward again, closing the space she had gained, and his hand shot out, not to hurt but to catch her chin in a firm, unyielding grip. She gasped softly, her eyes meeting his. His voice dropped to a growl. His words slow, deliberate. "Who sent you?" The question struck her like lightning. She stared at him, stunned. He didn't see her yet for who she truly was. The princess thought dead. No, he thought she was a spy. Pawn. Someone planted in his court to deceive him. Her mouth parted, but words caught in her throat. She could not answer without unraveling everything. But Blake's grip tightened, his golden eyes burning into her soul. "Answer me," he commanded, "or I will tear your silence apart myself." The room spun. Her heart raced. And for the first time since she'd entered this castle, Isabella realized her silence was no longer her greatest weapon. It was her greatest weakness. And Blake had just broken it. Some lies were made of words. Hers was made of silence. And now, with every beat of her heart, that silence threatened to shatter. Blake's grip was just on her chin, his golden eyes burning into her, demanding the truth. His question, "Who sent you?" still echoed in the chamber. Isabella's breath came in shallow bursts, her throat tight, her pulse hammering so loudly she feared he could hear it. If she confessed now, if she told him she was Isabella, the princess thought dead, it would destroy her fragile cover. Worse, it would put her in greater danger. Blake was feared across kingdoms, but she didn't know if his power meant safety for her, or doom. So she lied. "I." Her voice trembled, weak from disuse. "I didn't speak because—" She closed her eyes, forcing tears into them, letting them slide down her cheeks like shields. "Because silence is safer." The words were fragile, broken, but they rang true enough. Blake's gaze narrowed. His thumb brushed against her jaw, not with gentleness, but with unnerving scrutiny, as if her very skin might betray her. "Safer from what?" he growled. She shook her head quickly, her eyes pleading with him to stop digging, to let her secret remain buried. "From men who hurt women who speak too much. I thought if I stayed silent, no one would notice me." The chamber fell silent. Blake's hand dropped from her chin, but his stare didn't waver. He studied her as though weighing every heartbeat for deceit. His wolf stirred within him, restless, prowling. He could sense it, something about her was wrong, incomplete. She wasn't just a servant hiding behind a lie, but the scent of her fear. It was real. The sound of her voice. It was haunting, beautiful, like music he'd once heard in a distant memory. His wolf growled inside him. Or something more. Blake turned sharply, breaking the intensity, pacing across the room like a caged beast. His hands clenched, then released. He wanted to rip the truth from her, to tear away the mask she wore. Yet some instinct held him back. She was fragile, trembling, but strong beneath it, like a flame refusing to be smothered. He stopped, his back to her. "If silence keeps you safe," he said coldly, "then you'll stay under my protection. But know this." He glanced over his shoulder, his golden eyes catching the candlelight. "I don't protect liars." Isabella's breath caught. He didn't believe her, not fully. But he wasn't exposing her either. For now her mask held. The days that followed blurred with unease. Blake kept her close, assigning her tasks within the castle where his eyes, or his guards, could watch her. Isabella remained quiet, speaking only when forced, her voice soft and fleeting. Every time she spoke, she felt Blake's gaze sharpen, his body tense, as though her words rang in a place he had long buried. Yet something else began to grow in those stolen glances. Unspoken longing. A dangerous bond neither could ignore. One evening, Isabella found herself alone in the garden behind the castle, the air heavy with the scent of roses and earth. She tilted her face to the moonlight, allowing herself a moment of peace. "You shouldn't be out here alone." The voice rumbled behind her, deep, commanding. She turned, heart leaping. Blake stood in the shadows, arms crossed, his presence filling the space. She stammered, her voice small. "I needed air." He stepped closer, his gaze fixed on her lips as though every syllable that left them was a secret only he was allowed to hear. Your voice, he said quietly, almost to himself. It doesn't belong to a servant. It's something else. Isabella's chest tightened. She lowered her gaze quickly, afraid of what he might read in her eyes. You're imagining things. His hand shot out, gripping her wrist, not cruelly but firmly, keeping her from retreating. His touch sent fire racing up her arm. My wolf doesn't imagine, he murmured. His breath was warm against her ear. His closeness intoxicating. It knows. Her heart pounded, torn between fear and something far more dangerous, desire. She swallowed hard, her lips trembling. Let me go. But he didn't. Not until her eyes flicked up to meet his, and he saw the storm raging within them. His chest rose and fell sharply, as though restraining himself took every ounce of control he had. Finally, he released her, stepping back with a growl under his breath. Careful, girl. Secrets have a way of burning through silence. She fled before her own mask cracked too far. But danger was not finished stalking her. 2 nights later, the castle gates were breached by intruders, rogue wolves, caught before they could slip past the guards. They were dragged, bloodied and snarling, into the dungeons. Blake descended into the cold, stone-walled chamber himself, his presence filling the space like a storm. Isabella, drawn by morbid curiosity and her duty to bring water, lingered in the shadows, unseen. The rogues spat and cursed, their eyes gleaming with hatred. But one of them, half-conscious, beaten, laughed when Blake demanded answers. You think your castle is safe, Alpha? The rogue hissed through broken teeth. You shelter ghosts. Blake's hand shot out, gripping the man's throat. Explain. The rogue's grin widened, blood staining his teeth. The lost princess lives. And she's in your castle. The words detonated in the dungeon, echoing off the stone walls. Isabella's knees weakened, her heart plunging. Blake's grip tightened on the rogue's throat, fury flashing in his golden eyes. What princess? But Isabella didn't wait to hear the answer. She fled up the steps, her silence finally breaking inside her chest. The mask was cracking, and soon the truth would blaze free. The council chamber was thick with tension, the kind that slithered into the air like smoke and coiled around everyone's throats. Torches burned along the stone walls, shadows dancing wildly across the carved banners of past kings. Blake sat at the head of the long oak table, his presence like a storm contained in human form. His counselors, gray-haired, sharp-eyed, eager for blood, watched him closely, whispering amongst themselves. But their whispers died as soon as the heavy doors creaked open. Isabella was brought forward. She walked with her chin raised, though every fiber of her being trembled. Her soft servant's gown looked out of place under the scrutiny of the men who ruled beside the Alpha King. Yet, her quiet grace filled the room with something no counselor could name but all of them felt, an aura that didn't belong to a mere maid. Blake's golden eyes tracked her every movement. His wolf clawed restlessly at the surface of his control, a primal instinct howling, she's ours. She's more than what she claims to be. When Isabella stopped before him, the silence stretched unbearably. The firelight glinted off the curve of her cheek, her lips pressed into a tight line, her hands clenched to keep them from trembling. Speak, Blake commanded, his voice a growl that echoed against the vaulted ceiling. Her lashes fluttered, but she met his gaze. For the first time since she entered his castle, her silence cracked, not with lies, not with evasions, but with a confession that carried the weight of a kingdom. I am no servant, she whispered, her voice trembling but clear. I am Isabella Valerius, daughter of the late King Aurelian and Queen Selene. I am the princess your kingdom thought was dead. The words dropped like stones into a still lake. Gasps rippled through the council. Chairs scraped against stone. One of the older lords stood sharply, slamming his fist on the table. Impossible! The princess perished years ago during the rebellion. We all saw the flames consume her chambers. But Isabella's eyes burned with truth. I escaped, barely. My nursemaid smuggled me out through the servant passages. Since that day I've hidden. If I had revealed myself, I would have been hunted and executed long before now. Murmurs rose like a storm tide. Some called her a liar, others paled with unease, but all of them looked to Blake, the Alpha King whose judgment alone could end or spare her. Blake leaned forward, elbows braced against the carved arms of his throne-like chair. His eyes narrowed, unreadable, but inside his chest his heart thundered. He could hear her heartbeat, fast, terrified but steady. She wasn't lying. His wolf whispered fiercely, "Mate, princess." But his human mind wrestled with anger. She had deceived him for weeks, maybe longer. She had let him question her silence, let him grow suspicious, even toyed with his patience. Yet even as rage coiled in his gut, another emotion stirred, admiration. It took steel to stand here, before the most powerful wolves of the kingdom, and reveal a truth that could damn her. One of his counselors, Lord Regulus, stepped forward with venom in his eyes. "Your Majesty, this is trickery. If she is truly the lost princess, then she is a danger to your throne. She carries the blood of the rival house that once betrayed us. She should be executed before her claim sparks rebellion." Executed? Blake's voice rumbled, deadly quiet. His claws threatened to pierce through his fingertips. "Yes," Regulus barked. "The kingdom cannot afford such lies. If word spreads that she lives, factions will rise against you. The safest course is to cut her down before the embers of treachery ignite again." Isabella's heart pounded so loudly she thought it might break through her ribs. Her knees nearly buckled, but she refused to let them see her weakness. She had lived in shadows too long. If this was to be her end, then she would face it with the dignity of the crown she once carried. "I do not seek to steal a throne," she said, her voice breaking but rising stronger on each word. "I only wanted to live, to breathe without fear. But if you condemn me now, know this. You will kill not a traitor but a survivor." Blake's jaw flexed. His council erupted in heated voices, some demanding her death, others calling for imprisonment, a few daring to whisper that she might be the key to strengthening alliances with noble houses who still revered her bloodline. The storm roared louder and louder until Blake rose to his full height. His command silenced the chamber instantly. His golden eyes glowed like molten fire as he spoke, voice vibrating with authority that no wolf could deny. "You will not lay a finger on her." Gasps filled the air, disbelief etched on every face. Regulus sputtered. "Your Majesty, surely you cannot." Blake cut him off with a snarl that shook the room. "Do you question my rule, Lord Regulus?" The older wolf froze, paling under the Alpha King's glare. Blake's gaze swept over the entire table, each counselor shrinking back beneath its weight. His voice was thunder, sharp and final. "She has spoken the truth. Whether she is princess or servant, she is under my protection now. Touch her, and you answer to me." The chamber fell into stunned silence. Isabella's lips parted, eyes wide. She hadn't expected salvation. She had braced herself for chains, for death, for the crushing weight of betrayal. But instead, he had chosen her. Her chest ached with something dangerous, something she shouldn't feel, hope. Blake turned his back on the council, dismissing them with a flick of his hand. "Leave us. All of you." The counselors hesitated, exchanging wary glances, but none dared defy their king. One by one they filed out, their robes whispering against stone, until the heavy doors slammed shut and the chamber was empty except for Blake and Isabella. The silence between them stretched thick and taut. Blake descended from his seat, each step deliberate, predatory. His eyes locked on her. She trembled, not from fear this time, but from the intensity in his gaze. The storm he had unleashed on her behalf still simmered in the air. When he stood before her, towering and unyielding, he reached out and tilted her chin up with a single clawed finger. "You should have told me," he growled, though his voice held more hurt than rage now. Her throat tightened. "Would you have believed me?" Blake's eyes softened for a fleeting second, but then hardened again. I don't know. But now I have no choice but to believe you. And protect you. Even if it tears my kingdom apart. Her breath caught. She wanted to speak, to thank him, to beg him to let her go before she dragged him into her curse. But words failed her. Blake released her chin but leaned closer. His voice a low rumble only she could hear. From this day on, you are no longer a servant. You are mine to guard, mine to watch. And God's help anyone who dares threaten you. Her heart hammered wildly. His words were a vow, a claim, and a warning all at once. And though she should have recoiled, some part of her soul, the part that still remembered warmth, laughter, and dreams, whispered back, perhaps fate has not abandoned me after all. Yet deep down, both knew the storm was only beginning. Word spread like wildfire through the kingdom. Whispers carried on the wind, slipping into taverns, weaving through market stalls, and echoing in the dim halls of noble estates. The lost princess lives. It was spoken with awe in some places, with hatred in others. For the loyal houses who had once mourned the fall of her family, it was a miracle, a chance to rally behind the bloodline they believed destined to heal the fractured realm. But for rivals and ambitious wolves who had tasted power in the absence of the Valerius line, it was a threat, a spark that could ignite rebellion. Within days, rival packs stirred. Border patrols reported unusual movements, banners rising where they hadn't in years, armies gathering under secret oaths. Blake stood on the balcony of his war chamber, staring out over the darkening horizon. The torches below burned in neat rows, soldiers drilling late into the night. His golden eyes gleamed hard as steel. He had seen wars begin before, but never one born of the woman who now occupied his every thought. Behind him, Isabella lingered in the shadows of the chamber. She wore a gown Blake had insisted on, a deep midnight blue that clung to her slender frame, marking her not as a servant, but as something higher. Still, she carried herself uneasily, the weight of all eyes on her pressing like chains. Everywhere I go, she whispered, her voice trembling, they stare at me as if I've risen from the grave. They don't see me, Blake. They see a symbol, a ghost, a spark for war. Blake turned, his jaw tightening. And yet you are alive, flesh and blood. That truth matters more than their whispers. Her hands fisted at her sides. Does it? Because since I opened my mouth, your council watches you like vultures. Rival packs march on your borders. And your people fear what my existence means. I should leave. If I go, they'll stop preparing for war. His wolf growled through him, low and dangerous. Do not speak of leaving me. The words came out harsher than he intended, and Isabella flinched. Blake closed the distance between them in 2 strides, his hands gripping her shoulders firmly but not unkindly. His golden gaze burned into hers. You are not the cause of this, he said, his voice steady, anchoring her. The packs that march, they would have found an excuse regardless. Power-hungry wolves always do. But now they will find me standing in their way. She searched his eyes, torn between believing him and the guilt curling in her gut. You risk everything by keeping me here. And I would risk it again, he answered without hesitation. The sincerity in his tone disarmed her. For weeks she had built walls, hiding behind silence, behind lies, behind a mask of servitude. But every time Blake spoke with that raw conviction, cracks spread through her defenses. Her heart betrayed her with its quickening pace, its desperate pull toward him. Still, fear clawed at her. Not for herself, but for him. The next morning, Blake assembled his council. Maps sprawled across the long table, marked with shifting enemy banners. His commanders reported raids on outlying villages, ambushes along trade routes. The threat of full-scale war loomed closer with every hour. Lord Regulus, ever the hawk, slammed his fist against the table. This is madness. Already we've lost patrols on the northern border. If we do not hand over the girl, if we do not rid ourselves of this curse, our enemies will descend upon us like wolves on a carcass. Blake's eyes flashed dangerously. She is not a curse. She is under my protection. You risk your throne for a woman who should have burned with her family. Regulus spat. The chamber erupted with shouting, half the council arguing for her exile or death, the others too fearful to oppose Blake openly. Through it all, Isabella sat silent at the far end of the table, her hands folded in her lap. Every cruel word was a dagger. Every accusation echoed the fears in her own heart. At last, Blake rose to his feet. His voice thundered above the din. This council exists to advise me, not to dictate my decisions. Isabella stays. And if any of you betray that order, I will strip your lands and titles myself. The silence that followed was colder than stone. But in that silence, Isabella felt the walls of loyalty shift. She saw it in their eyes. Resentment, calculation, the seeds of treachery taking root. The growing bond. Later that night, Blake found her alone in the gardens. The moonlight spilled silver across the roses, dew glistening like tears. She stood with her arms wrapped around herself, staring into the dark beyond the castle walls. You shouldn't be out here alone, Blake murmured, approaching. Her lips curved faintly. I'm never truly alone, am I? Not with you watching. Always, he admitted, stepping closer. Silence fell between them, heavy with the things they hadn't spoken. She turned to face him, her eyes shimmering with conflict. Why do you fight so hard for me? She asked softly. When everyone else sees me as a threat. Blake's hand rose, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Because I see you. Not the ghost of a princess, not a symbol of rebellion. And I'll be damned before I let this world take you from me. Her breath hitched. She wanted to protest, to push him away for his own safety, but her body betrayed her. Leaning closer, her heart thrumming in rhythm with his. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine what it might feel like to belong. Not just to survive, but to be cherished. The ambush. Days later, Blake rode out with a small guard to inspect the eastern border. Tension hung thick in the air. Rival banners had been sighted not far from the ridge. Isabella remained in the castle, pacing endlessly, her chest tight with dread. The ambush came at twilight. Hidden archers released a volley of poisoned arrows, striking 2 guards instantly. Blake shifted mid-leap, his massive black wolf form tearing into the attackers with savage fury. His claws ripped through armor, his fangs sank into throats, but the enemy was relentless, driven not just by war, but by desperation to claim the bounty placed on Isabella's head. One assassin broke through the chaos, a blade glistening with green poison. Blake turned too late. The knife slashed across his side, the venom burning instantly through his veins. With a roar, he tore the assassin apart, but the damage was done. His wolf staggered, collapsing to his knees as the battle raged around him. The collapse. By the time his guards carried him back to the castle, he was pale, sweat-drenched, his breathing shallow. Isabella ran to meet them in the courtyard, her gown tangling around her legs as she stumbled toward him. "Blake!" she cried, falling to her knees beside him. His eyes, usually blazing gold, were dim, clouded with pain. He tried to speak, but his words slurred, the poison thick in his blood. "No, don't cry," he rasped, lifting a trembling hand to her cheek. Tears spilled freely down her face, her hands clutching his as if sheer will could keep him tethered. "Stay with me. Please, Blake. Stay." His lips curved faintly, even as his body shook. "I told you. You're mine to protect." And then, before her horrified eyes, his strength gave way. He collapsed fully into her arms, his weight heavy, his heartbeat faltering. Isabella screamed his name into the night, her voice breaking with terror. For the first time in years, she wasn't just a survivor. She was a woman staring at the man who had claimed her heart, and watching death close its claws around him. The poison that ran through Blake's veins was meant to kill kings. Bitterroot, blackthorn, and silver essence, the deadliest blend brewed by assassins sworn to see his reign end. Yet even as his body weakened, His grip on life clung with savage ferocity. Not because of duty. Not because of his crown. Because of her. The healers scrambled in the chamber, their hands shaking as they tried poultices and tonics, but Blake's breaths grew shallow, his skin cold and slick with sweat. Panic swelled in the air like a choking fog. Soldiers muttered prayers. Servants wept. But Isabella, once the mute servant hiding in corners, stepped forward, her voice slicing through the chaos. Enough! All eyes turned to her. For a heartbeat, even the flickering torches seemed to bow to her command. She knelt beside Blake, her fingers pressing gently to his throat, then his wrist, feeling the sluggish, uneven thrum of his pulse. Boil water, she ordered a maid. You fetch wolfsbane root, dried sage, and ironwort from the stores. And you, she pointed at the captain of the guard who stood dumbstruck, send riders to the mountains. There's a healer there, an elder who knows poison like this. Ride until your horses collapse if you must. The captain blinked, stunned. But her eyes blazed. Do it. The authority in her voice was not learned in servitude. It was born in blood, carved by lineage. It was the command of a princess. The soldiers obeyed. Within moments, the room whirled into action, driven not by panic, but by Isabella's steel resolve. She ground herbs herself, mixing them into a bitter paste she pressed to Blake's wound. She forced his lips apart, dribbling a tincture down his throat. When his body convulsed, she held him steady, whispering fiercely, "You don't get to leave me. Not now. Not ever." Hours stretched into a torturous blur. Isabella never left his side. She wiped the sweat from his brow, cooled his burning skin, pressed her hand to his chest to feel the stubborn rise and fall of his breathing. Outside the chamber, whispers spread like wildfire. Servants told tales of how the mute girl commanded the guards, how her hands moved like she had been trained in the ways of kings. The pack began to see her not as an omen of war, but as a woman who might stand at their alpha's side. And when dawn broke, Blake stirred. His golden eyes fluttered open, dim but alive. His throat rasped with the effort of speech. Isabella! Her head snapped up, relief flooding her eyes. She seized his hand, pressing it to her cheek. I'm here. You're safe. He studied her through bleary eyes, his lips twitching in the faintest smirk. You gave orders. Her cheeks flushed. Someone had to. You were too busy nearly dying. A low, weak chuckle escaped him. Even poisoned and broken, he found her fire intoxicating. You saved me, he whispered. Not just a servant. Not a ghost. You are mine. Her breath caught, tears brimming in her eyes. Blake. He squeezed her hand weakly. Mate. The word trembled in the air, heavy with destiny. It was not spoken lightly by wolves. And from his lips, it was a vow binding as blood. Her chest ached, her soul quivering with recognition. She had denied it for weeks, buried it beneath fear and lies. But hearing it from him shattered her last defense. She leaned down, her forehead pressing to his. Yes, she whispered. Yours. But fate is cruel to lovers who dare defy kingdoms. Blake's recovery was slow, his strength returning inch by inch. He insisted on resuming his duties, but Isabella refused to let him push too hard, standing between him and every demand that might sap his life. The council muttered at her boldness, but none dared cross her, not when Blake's wolf growled at even the suggestion. Yet their enemies did not rest. One moonless night, while Blake was deep in the throes of healing sleep, assassins crept into the castle. Isabella sensed them before she saw them, the faint scrape of boots, the shift of air in the corridor. Her instincts screamed danger. She grabbed the dagger Blake kept beneath his pillow and slipped into the hall. 3 shadows moved toward the chamber. Wolves cloaked in black, their eyes glinting with hatred. Step aside, girl, one hissed. The Alpha King's curse dies tonight. Her grip tightened on the dagger. You'll have to kill me first. They lunged. Isabella ducked the first blow, her blade slashing across a wrist. The second attacker swung wide, and she rammed her knee into his gut. The third caught her arm, twisting hard, but she sank her teeth into his hand, ripping free. Her body burned, every motion fueled not by training but by desperation. She wasn't a warrior like Blake, but she was a survivor. And tonight survival meant fighting like hell. The clash drew guards. Steel rang, claws flashed, and in minutes the attackers were subdued. 2 were slain, 1 dragged before Blake's council, spitting blood and curses. Dragged into the council chamber, the surviving assassin sneered at Isabella as she stood beside Blake's throne. His lips curled with venom. "You think you've won? Foolish girl. You're no servant, no mute. You're the lost princess. And every pack from here to the mountains knows it." Gasps rippled through the room. Isabella's stomach dropped. The assassin's smile widened. "They'll never stop hunting you. You're the key, the threat, the prize. And when they take you, the Alpha King will bleed." Before Blake could silence him, the man spat blood onto the floor and hissed, "The princess will die screaming." Blake's wolf surged. His aura exploded through the chamber, suffocating, raw power radiating from his very skin. His golden eyes blazed with fury. His voice thunderous, primal, shaking the very walls. "If she dies," he roared, his wolf fully unleashed, "I'll burn the world." The council cowered. Servants collapsed to their knees. Isabella's heart pounded, torn between terror and awe as the man beside her, her mate, her king, vowed destruction for her life. And in that vow, she knew the storm was only beginning. Blake's wolf still snarled, his body vibrating with barely contained rage, as Isabella stood frozen beside him. Around them, the council trembled, knowing that the fate of kingdoms now rested not in treaties or swords, but in the bond between a wolf and a princess. The war drums beat at dawn. Low and steady, they rolled across the valley like thunder, rattling the stones beneath the castle walls. Soldiers lined the battlements, their armor glinting red in the rising sun. The banners of rival packs fluttered in the distance, their armies spread like a black tide across the horizon. This was it, the storm Isabella had feared since the night she broke her silence. And at the heart of it all stood Blake, the Alpha King, his golden eyes blazing with fury and devotion. At his side, no longer hiding, no longer mute, was Isabella, the lost princess whose name had become a spark that set kingdoms ablaze. Blake's war council clamored with fear and fury. Lords argued, captains shouted, strategies clashed. But Blake silenced them with one command. "Enough." The chamber stilled. He rose to his full height, power radiating from him like wildfire. "We will not cower. We will not surrender her. Isabella is mine, and as long as I draw breath, this kingdom will not fall." Isabella's heart hammered. Every word from him was a blade cutting through her fear. But she also knew this war wasn't just Blake's to fight. It was hers. When the council dispersed, she approached him, her hand finding his. "Let me fight." He stiffened, his eyes narrowing. "You've already risked enough. I nearly lost you once." "And I nearly lost you," she countered, her voice fierce. "This war was born because of me. If I hide again, more blood will spill. Let me stand beside you. Not behind you. Beside you." For a long moment, his wolf snarled against the idea. But then, slowly, Blake nodded. "Then we fight together." The enemy lines surged forward at midday, steel flashing, wolves shifting beneath a blood-red sky. The battlefield roared with chaos, clashing swords, snarling beasts, arrows screaming through the air. Isabella fought with dagger and wit, moving with the grace of someone who had survived on instinct for years. She struck quickly, never lingering, weaving through the battlefield like a shadow. But then she saw him, her betrayer, Lord Darius, the advisor who had once sworn loyalty to her father, only to sell her family to the fire that consumed their throne. His eyes met hers across the chaos, widening in shock. "You," he spat, as if seeing a ghost. "No ghost," Isabella snarled, stepping forward, her dagger gleaming. The princess you couldn't kill. Their clash was brutal. He swung his sword with ruthless strength, but Isabella was driven by something fiercer. Years of silence, years of loss, years of pain buried in her chest. She ducked his blade, slashing across his arm. "You destroyed my family," she cried. "You tried to erase me." Darius sneered, blood dripping down his sleeve. "You were weak then. You're weak now." But Isabella's eyes blazed with fire. "No, I was silent then. Now I have a voice." With a final cry, she drove her dagger into his chest. His body staggered, his sword falling from his hand as shock spread across his face. And then, he collapsed lifeless, the shadow of betrayal finally erased. Blake tore through enemies with savage force, his wolf unleashed in all its terrifying glory. His claws dripped crimson, his roar scattered foes. But when he saw Isabella standing over Darius's corpse, her chest heaving, he felt something deeper than victory. He shifted back, blood and sweat streaking his skin, and strode to her side. Together they turned, shoulder to shoulder, as the last wave of enemies surged. "Ready?" he asked, his lips curving into a dangerous grin. She lifted her dagger, fire blazing in her eyes. "Always." Together they struck, a storm of wolf and woman, alpha and princess. By the time the sun dipped low, the battlefield was theirs. The rival packs, broken and bloodied, fled into the shadows. The war was over. That night, the great hall was filled to its very walls. Lords, soldiers, servants, all gathered to see what fate would be declared. Murmurs rippled as Isabella entered, her gown torn and blood-stained, but her head held high. She no longer moved like a servant. She no longer carried herself like a shadow. She moved like a queen. Blake stood at the dais, his golden eyes sweeping the crowd. The council that had once demanded her death now sat silent, cowed by the memory of his wolf's roar. He extended his hand to her. "Come." She stepped forward, every heartbeat echoing like thunder in her ears. When her hand slid into his, the hall stilled. Blake raised their joined hands high, his voice carrying like a command from the gods. She was once the princess they rejected, the woman they hunted, but no longer. "This is Isabella, my mate, my equal, my queen. From this day forth, none shall touch her. None shall doubt her. She is mine and I am hers." The hall erupted, some in cheers, some in stunned silence, some in reluctant acceptance. But none dared oppose him. Not now. Not ever. Blake turned to Isabella, his voice dropping to a vow only for her. "No more hiding. No more silence. You are my claim, my heart, my forever." Her eyes brimmed with tears, her voice steady as she whispered back, "And you are mine." The fire in the great hall blazed, casting gold light across their faces. Blake's wolf prowled inside him, satisfied, protective, claiming. And Isabella, once the rejected princess in hiding, stood tall at his side, no longer a shadow, no longer forgotten. She was the Alpha King's chosen mate, his queen, his equal. And as the kingdom bowed before them, one truth echoed into eternity. The world would remember Isabella. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next story. Drop a comment below and let me know your favorite moment. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, keep listening, keep imagining.